Y for Turbo.
Welcome back to the Y for Turbo podcast here. Today we're going to be talking about the NHL entry draft happened last month in Chicago, Illinois, 2017 NHL draft. Pretty good year for rookies. I would say more of a, rather than in a franchise year, I would say an elite year if we're talking in NHL, EA Sports NHL terms. But today is the second podcast. That means only one thing. We will be talking about the second overall pick in the draft from the Philadelphia Flyers, Nolan Patrick, a current Flyer. Be talking about a few different things in his repertoire skill-wise and why he fell to second when for over a season, multiple years, he had been seen as the 2017 first overall pick from the Brandon Wheat Kings. He's a big guy, 6'2", 200 pounds, good two-way center, also plays the right wing in certain situations. Definitely on the Wheat Kings had both PK and power play opportunities abound on that team. Had really great success over there, getting in the dirty areas and things of that nature. So today on this podcast, I want to explore why he fell to number 2 and why the Flyers will benefit from having this player over maybe some others that were available in that slot, second overall there, which there were a lot. There were a lot of really great first-round talent. Hershier going to New Jersey, obviously, and we talked about that in the previous episode, so if you have not listened to that, go check that out on either YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and we can come back to this one. But that one we talked mostly about the reason why the Devils picked Hershier over Patrick, and this episode will be very similar with more of a spotlight on Patrick instead. Now, the Flyers are an organization that's kind of in the tweener stage. They've shipped off a lot of different players. They just lost Shen. They don't really have like an identity at this point, I'd say. But this pick is a step in the right direction. And honestly, I feel like with a few free agent pickups and maybe a draft or two, 3 years, maybe less because you want to win with Giroux now. I'd say they have a good another playoff run in them. I remember a few years ago, they were my favorites to win the Cup a few years ago when they came in, and that year it ended up being let's see here, I think that was the year the LA Kings won. I think that was around 2012. They had a very strong team going in 2012. Obviously, there was the first year with Giroux as captain. A little shaky. He got off to a rough start, not getting a lot of points early on in the season, but he did rebound from that. Still a great player. Obviously, he had a lot to live up to through coaching changes and things like that. With on the leadership side, that's to be expected. So they're a team that's hopefully found an identity. I've always been somewhat of a fan just because of the kind of style of play they've always had. They're always going back to the Broadway bully style, and it's it's that type of play with more of I'd say a defensive technique added in at this point. There's players like Simmons, who's just a great gritty player. I remember going to a Flyers Wings game at the Joe and just absolutely hating Simmons' guts. He was in a fight with, I think, Brendan Smith that night. It was just anarchy. He was all over the ice, tons of big hits. I think he even had like a hip check at mid-ice, and it was just absolutely insane. The guy is crazy quick, but everybody's getting older, and you could say, yeah, a lot of these players are still in their prime, but this is a team that either trades everything and rebuilds or wins now, and I think with the addition of Nolan Patrick, they win now. One of the things I was checking out here on some of the online posts that have been happening about, where do teams find themselves with current prospects, things like that. I read them all the time just to kind of get an idea around the league of what hockey writers are thinking about. And I was reading the hockey writers, which is funny, and they were projecting Nolan Patrick starting on a line with Wayne Simmons. Now, I don't really know about this one. I would think maybe they'd put him more along the lines of I don't know, maybe the third liner or something like that, because he is, they have a lot of two-way guys at center. If you're looking at projections for the 2017-18 season, obviously down the middle, Giroux, line one with Voracek. They are saying Konechny on that first line with them. Seems like a good line. If there's chemistry there already, why not just keep it? It's meant to be that way. Second line, they're saying Lindblom with Patrick and Simmons. I can see, if they're looking to, they already see that Nolan Patrick is a good two-way guy. Had great defensive numbers at the center position. Why wouldn't you want a first year in the NHL to kind of be playing against, something like a third line or something like that? I just see the matchups being maybe skewed, especially if he has a lot more ice time, which could be great because maybe they're trying to grow him very quickly. The one thing I really don't want to see is a young kid get his confidence just broken down from playing against the best talent in the league, because there's a lot of great talented teams that are going to, he's not just playing against the opposing second line or the opposing first line. With the amount of minutes he'll be getting on a second line, if they run a traditional style of minutes to line ratio, you don't want to not have Simmons out there, and this line's going to be playing a decent amount. So this is just one projected lineup. I'm not putting all my eggs in the basket of believing this or even keeping it as an option, but just to see that this is the feeling around the league is very interesting, honestly. I think him in the top six is actually probably a good idea. Now that I think about it, if you can get him someone, I'm just looking at Simmons, just because I've seen Simmons play a lot more than a lot of the other players on the team. Obviously, like the big three on the Flyers in Philadelphia is Giroux, Voracek, Simmons is going to be mentioned in that as well. Now they do have Couturier and Filppula now. Now they're putting Filppula on the fourth line in this projection with Raffl and Lehtera. I guess I see that. Maybe like some kind of slightly, I don't know, there's slightly two-way grittiness maybe with Raffl. A little bit of speed, but not really. I mean, I guess it's maybe the spare parts line. They do have Matt Reed scratched in this current lineup. Now, like I said, this is just a lineup that they've projected. Like one game, or this could change after a period or even a shift. Who knows? And it looks like they've got pretty good center depth. Pending injuries, it's nice to have that because, you want the first guy to touch the puck to be someone who's skilled enough on any line. And especially if they can win face-offs, it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a good shift. And if Nolan Patrick can kind of just be at the same or similar level of two-way play, maybe even just defensive zone play as someone like a Giroux at some point in his career, maybe not this first season, but I'm thinking they maybe got a very similar player because Giroux is one of the best two-way forwards in the game, and that's a pivotal piece to have. And I know in recent years he hasn't been as on fire as he used to be, but I think he's matured in his game, and having that on the first line as an anchor is invaluable. And obviously Voracek is a great shooter. Konechny's, great. So it's going to be one of those teams that is I don't see them making the playoffs with this current lineup. Now, this is pending any trades or anything like that, but I don't see them making any moves too dramatically. Now, I could talk about a little more about their defensive core. They do have some decent players. I know Ghost re-signs and didn't have the best follow-up year to his just on fire first year. But that's okay. Gostisbehere is a great, puck moving defenseman, and him being in the top six, it's always going to help out, and especially if he can kind of recapture that magic that happened in the first season where he was getting I remember in NHL 16 he was getting those fire cards all the time, and he was always hot. He was always doing something. So if that can kind of be something that's paired up eventually with the Patrick line or even the Giroux line, if that can happen again, you could see this being a defensive-minded team that can get goals from anywhere, because Giroux can get a goal, Voracek can get goals. Pretty much anyone on this team can score some scrappy grinder goals, and then you've got their back line, their defensemen that really can shine through on that. I always liked watching Gudas. Really cool physical defenseman. This guy's not going to be potting in shots, putting any in the net really, but it's really nice when you've got a big physical defenseman back there. And, who knows? McDonald, old vet on the team, Provorov, I feel like you've got a lot of top four guys maybe, or maybe just a lot of top six guys, some younger guys, things like that, but it's definitely not something that's finished. This is not a finished build. They've got their superstars, but it's the supporting cast that needs a little bit of work, and Nolan Patrick brings that. So back to Patrick, in the last episode, I didn't really talk too much about the Devils, so I wanted to talk about the Flyers a little bit before I got more into the player himself, because I believe talking about his home, his new line, or anything like that is fun, and it's important. It's important to kind of see what's going to be happening. Now, these aren't any speculations on if they're going to throw him on the PK or anything like that. They've got a lot of great two-way centers already. I don't see him maybe killing penalties unless something dramatic happens, because pretty much every center on that team would be able to be on the PK. Not to say he won't be. They will probably stick him on a few, but I don't see him being the number one dude they go to at all times. Obviously, no rookie's going to be the number one guy just yet, unless you're McDavid. I really can't think of anyone else. And that's because of the team McDavid was on, but even Crosby wasn't the number one guy his rookie season. You still had Lemieux. It's one of those things that, it's one of those things. I'm not gonna necessarily get into too much, argument on who's good, who's not, that kind of thing. I'm just saying they're not going to lean fully on Patrick, and that's good. They shouldn't, because like I said earlier, it's all about confidence going into the first year. He's dominated his on the Wheat Kings WHL. It's one of those things that I'm sure he's a humble guy, and he's not automatically just thinking he's going to tear up the NHL. We're too far along in time, I think, that no one thinks that they can just, with the analysis these days, no one thinks they can just hang with an NHL player. Even the quote-unquote worst NHL players are still playing in the National Hockey League. Teams you think are laughing stocks, before the interviews before the games with the teams playing these quote-unquote, again, laughing stock teams will say, look, we want to get a win out of this. We just got to focus. This team and this building is tough to play in. It's kind of a canned response, but it's one of those things that there's always going to be teams that on paper, yeah, they're not doing well stat-wise, but it's still the NHL. It's still difficult to play in, and it's frustrating. Very frustrating to play in. I can just imagine being a rookie tearing up your previous league It's like men with boys. You know, you're the man and you're playing with kids. And then you go to something more along the lines of men with men, or you're the boy and you're playing with men. I can't imagine. I can't imagine the frustration that could entail if not handled properly by coaching staff and management. So that kind of leads me to my next point, why Patrick kind of fell. He's a great fit for the Flyers. And honestly, he was a pretty good fit for the Devils. I think they did make the right choice, inevitably, both teams, for the style of play they're going for. But I think at the end of the day, injuries played a big role in this, and the breakout year of Hershey really played a big role in it. World Junior play, things of that nature. So the good news, starting off just right away, Patrick is back on the ice for the Flyers after sports hernia surgery. Now, this was kind of what I was going to mention when I wrote the talking points for this podcast. This was before, this was as of actually earlier this morning. He was back out on the ice in the Flyers facility. So that's great to hear. That's a good thing. No matter if you go for somebody's team or not, it's good to see a young guy getting past the injury bug and being able to get back there out on the ice. And hopefully we'll see him next season, because it's so fun, especially the first couple months. You see these crazy plays. The NHL hasn't totally figured out some of these, young guns, and it's cool to see him tear up the league for a little bit. And hopefully Patrick will be that way. I'm really just hoping for a defensive-minded superstar. I want this guy to be another Giroux. That's the kind of play I love. I love to watch disciplined defensive hockey, just old classic hockey, and it's just fun to see when you see just a perfect takeaway or steal, or good back in their own zone, protecting the zone, cutting off passes, making the outlet pass, changing, getting an offensive unit out there that can just go in, forecheck, hopefully get a goal. It's really fun to see. And that's why I'm really excited for someone like Nolan Patrick on a team like the Flyers that is very defensively minded, especially on the forward side. They've got some good skilled wingers, but there's a lot of grit and defense on that team, which is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And that's kind of hockey I really like. I don't really subscribe a lot to any rivalry between the Flyers or anyone else. I don't go for a team that's like a big rival of the Flyers. So for me, it's like, cool, whatever. Not really unbiased, because I do openly say the Wings are my team. They always have been. And that's mostly due to location and geography, but at the end of the day, that's it. But I can't say I dislike the Flyers. I can't say I dislike anybody on the team. I really enjoy watching Giroux play. I really enjoy watching a lot of Patrick's highlights. So that was one of the things I was going to say when I wrote the bullet points on this, before we found out he was good after surgery, skating again. The NHL has great level trainers, great level medical staff, and it's one of those things that's always going to benefit rookies coming in. Not to say the WHL doesn't, but you're getting the best doctors and sports trainers and surgeons in the world at this point. And it's really great to see that a kid like this can, on a team's dime, not have to worry about it and get past this injury that has plagued him, through the last few years. I know back in 2015, I believe, late 2015, early 2016, I think he had another sports hernia kind of injury. So hopefully, this is something that was, a blemish on his record. The injury bug is always something you want to watch out for, especially at a young age, because once a player grows, that bug grows. So it's good to see that the medical staff in Philly, or whoever, helped him out. Thank you for helping him out, getting him back on the ice for the fans. And, even if you're on a rival team's, side, it's good to always have the best players out there playing against each other, igniting the rivalry and keeping it, just 100% pure. It's one of those things that if one team wins because the other team is plagued by injuries, it's never, a fully... You're never fully just confident that your team won that because of skill. Obviously it's not it's not something we ever want to see. Somebody be injured constantly and that kind of thing. But back to his more skill side. Now, this guy, he's Canadian. He plays the Canadian brand of hockey, a little bit gritty, gets in the dirty areas, in the corners. He is a center, so he has that defensive side to him, which is great to see. I love defensive centers, like I've been saying. 36 games that he played for the Wheat Kings last season, got 46 points. So, plus 10 on point a game. That's great to see. Men playing with boys, that kind of thing. And really, none of the analysts, none of the NHL teams, other than the injury bug, are seeing any holes in his game, other than the injuries. He's a really great leader, captain of his team. In the WHL, like I said, gritty, super capable with the puck, keeps track of it, takes care of his home back in his defensive zone. And that's really all you can ask for, especially a team like the Flyers who kind of has that get the puck possession first mentality and get in the zone, make a few passes, get some gritty goals, some rebounds. It's great hockey to see. That's the kind of hockey I like seeing because it moves quick. They initially slow down the game, stopping in their defensive zone, stopping the puck carrier, getting in the corners. But then once they get in the offensive zone, it's passes, movement, low shot on net, maybe a rebound, maybe a high shot on net behind. There's some kind of play behind the boards. A lot of times when I was watching some Flyer highlights for this podcast in particular, just to kind of refresh my memory, I was seeing those kind of things. Now, you're seeing a lot of goals from the first two lines. You're seeing some Simmons, some Voracek, beauties, because they can all shoot the puck. But you're also getting the goals that are scrappy third and fourth line goals. Even Giroux's getting a lot of these scrappy goals that are coming off board play on a forecheck. Forecheck is very important to them, and I feel like getting Nolan Patrick in that lineup to play with the really fast line, maybe the second line with Simmons or, whoever's playing with him, I think it'll be a nice one. I think, they will pop him out on the power play. Maybe not the penalty kill. I can see him going out maybe in some situations just to see what he does. I can see him on the power play, though, just with how his shot has been and his ice vision, which is really good. Like I said, he's a good leader, especially out on the ice. I forget which highlight I was watching, but it was with obviously the Wheat Kings, and the play was totally orchestrated by him. Came into the zone, passes to his defenseman. There's a shot on net. He's already out front of the play, gets a juicy rebound, and it goes in. This starts from him recognizing that I'm going to go hard to net. They're going to get up. People know Nolan Patrick. They're going to cover him if he's got the puck. It's just kind of like it's creating this secondary option for the Flyers. Now, maybe this doesn't happen for 2-3 years, but if you can get an elite level player, he's already a great sized player. If you can get an elite level player at the size that he is, he's going to be that second option behind Giroux. They're constantly going to have to put out best defensive units against him because of his style of play. And if they don't, he'll capitalize on it. I'm hoping for that because that is exciting hockey to watch. And it's the chess side of hockey. It's the mind game behind hockey. I love that. I love going into a game and seeing, what's the coaching chess game going to be today? If they see Nolan Patrick come out there and they say, well, do we put our first line out to attempt to get a steal or, get a good forecheck off, get some shots off? Our best skill guys, depending on the team, the first line could be, like a Flyers team that has some good defensive two-way guys on the first line. Typically, if you're putting out a shooting line that's not the best on back checking, not the best on, in their own zone, I should say. It's a cool kind of chess game to see. Does this gamble pay off, or does Patrick take care of it? Does he get the puck occupied in their own defensive zone, pass the puck up, like I was saying earlier, to a winger or maybe back to a defenseman for a shot, comes into the zone, gets a scrappy goal? That's Flyers hockey. So I think he'll fit in, and I think he was a great. Obviously, any team that gets him, it's going to be a great pickup. I would have loved to have seen him on the Wings, obviously, especially if he can stay healthy. It's one of those things. Any team he goes to, you just want him to stay healthy. There's no reason you should ever go for anybody being injured, and that's a really, really big part of his game, unfortunately, is that he was injured, and it's a big, not so much his game, but part of his stock, his draft stock. So I just want to know, what line he's going to be on. It's really interesting to me to see that a lot of analysts are saying they'll probably pair him with Simmons. I can see this being a, Giroux type player. Maybe because he's gone to the Flyers, we'll see more of that play come out. Just because he is modeled in the two-way fashion, it would be so cool to see Giroux just talking to this kid. Both Canadian players just absolutely tearing it up. That would be just so cool, and I think it'll happen. I think that eventually the 1-2 punch of Patrick and Giroux is going to be something that really takes over in Philly, and their division, it's just one of those chess games out on the ice. So if you guys enjoyed it, or if you've got anything else to let me know, now this is a podcast, so I've got it on SoundCloud, iTunes, and on YouTube. I know a bulk of my audience will be watching on YouTube, so down in the comments, let me know. If you are listening on iTunes or on SoundCloud, I know there are some areas you can kind of let your voice be heard on those, profiles, quote unquote. But head over to YouTube, check it out. It's youtube.com/Y4Turbo, and there's tons of hockey talk there. I've got a lot of good plans for the future episodes, but right now it's looking really good talking about the draft. Once the season starts, it's going to be more of a news-based show, feature-based show. Cool, I got some cool ideas. We'll just leave it at that. But let me know what you think about Nolan Patrick on the Flyers. What line do you think he's going to be on? Is Giroux going to step in as a mentor? Do you think Couturier or Filppula is going to be more of a mentor with the 2-8 game? I think they're just trying to get Giroux too. I honestly think that would be the smartest play. Getting somebody who's dominant in the offensive zone, can eventually be a captain or assistant captain. He is a natural leader in the locker room, but give him a chance to prove himself on both ends of the ice. I'll think we'll see him out on the power play, maybe the PK. Do you think he'll be on the PK? I don't know. I think they got a lot of good centers already pretty well versed in that, a lot of vets. But just trying to go over everything I talked about. But let me know in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe if you dug it. You can subscribe to any of the RSS-style feeds for the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud. And that's it. We'll talk about the next draft pick, which is Miro Heiskanen. I'll get that name right next time on the Stars, but that was a good pickup by then. So thank you for listening or watching if you are on YouTube. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time out on the ice.